G'day mate, 40 here. Welcome back to 40 University. So we had a horrific attack at the Kabul airport that killed 12 Marines. All right, let's have a look at the New York Times top story in the news today. 12 US troops among scores killed at the Kabul airport. So there's going to be tremendous pressure on Joe Biden to reverse the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. To me, this just makes the case even stronger. We need to get the heck out of there. We don't have any vital national security interests being served by hanging out in Afghanistan. So let's get the heck out. To me, this is even more of a reason to get out. So Joe Biden says we're going to hunt down the people who did this. I don't think that particularly matters. All right, sunk costs are sunk. So we invested $1 trillion, $2 trillion in Afghanistan. Domestically, we spent trillions of dollars trying to even out lifelong outcomes for underperforming groups, and none of this has done any good. So good on Joe Biden. He's going to continue the evacuations of Americans out of Afghanistan. And what kind of crazy American goes to Afghanistan, and what kind of crazy Afghan sides with the Americans? All right, as Steve Saylor says, why did the Taliban win? Because they live in Afghanistan. We don't live in Afghanistan. So the people who live there are going to decide the fate of Afghanistan. So obviously a horrific day for the United States military. So 2 suicide bombers struck a packed crowd outside the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. So how much longer will this be known as the Hamid Karzai Airport? So 15 American service members were wounded. So apparently Joe Biden sent 5,800 troops to help evacuate Americans and Afghan allies. Well, maybe that was not such a great idea. Do you reward people who make bad decisions? All right, so what American would be there? When Joe Biden said the enemy is closer to home, who did he mean? I assume he means right-wing domestic terrorists. But you're probably wondering, what the heck does Richard Spencer have to say about all this? So Richard tweets, I voted for Joe Biden. He has exceeded my expectations. I did not vote for Joe Biden. He was not my choice for president, but I think he's done okay. And I think his Afghan policy has been right to wind up American involvement in Afghanistan. Richard says, he is a good president. He deserves steadfast support. Don't fall into the obvious traps laid before you, blaming him for partisan reasons or without thinking through the implications. Asking the question who benefits also leads us to understand how other powerful interests could benefit from today's terror bombing. Would a rising mujahideen pleading for American support in op-eds in the Washington Post be inclined to engage in such violence? Might they benefit from a renewed American presence? The answer is yes. Muslim terrorism isn't even terrorism, which has a political objective. It's just sheer murderous lunacy. The people jumping to blame the Taliban clearly view Muslims as deranged fanatics, solely bent on killing Americans in spectacular fashion, even when such attacks objectively harm their own self-interest. So the Taliban sponsoring such an attack, like these terrorist attacks at Kabul airport, it'd be like a quarterback whose team is up by 5 points with only seconds remaining, declining to just kneel down, instead frantically running the ball into his own end zone. It simply makes no sense. You don't know who is behind the attacks, but who benefits gives us the lay of the land. So the MAGA whack jobs who are emboldened by this attack will pursue impeachment, which might actually get traction this time. So I agree with his critique that trying to impeach Joe Biden over this is nuts. Joe Biden is doing the right thing, pulling us out of Afghanistan. The move would put Kamala Harris in office, but it would warn any presidents off taking action against Washington's endless military campaigns. So after today's depraved attack killing at least 60, Joe Biden will face tremendous pressure to keep a large presence in Afghanistan, maybe even renew the forever war and pursue regime change. So Joe Biden is facing the most difficult test of his life. Already he was subject to the ire of most of the media and the entire military establishment for sticking to his guns and proceeding with the necessary withdrawal from Afghanistan. So, yeah, I think Biden is doing the right thing. And Michael Tracy, who's, I think, my favorite commentator in the center-left realm, says the overwhelming reason that Joe Biden's approval rating has dropped 10% in the past week is that the US media is garbage. They can revert back to a 2004 mode at any time, and suddenly withdrawing from a war the supermajorities wanted over is a massive, debilitating scandal. So yeah, good on Joe Biden for not extending the August 31st deadline to withdraw from Afghanistan. So Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio was sentenced to 155 days in jail for burning a Black Lives Matter flag. Well, wait, is Black Lives Matter, is this flag somehow sacred? Was this blasphemy? And Richard says, this is a matter of what Americans consider sacred. Conservatives regard the American flag as sacred. For American liberals, Black Lives Matter has become their religious symbol. So burning a Black Lives Matter flag isn't about speech, it's an affront to God. So 155 days in prison for burning a Black Lives Matter flag. Maybe we just need blasphemy laws in this country. Make them explicit. So as for wearing masks, it seems just obvious to me night and day that wearing a mask is a good idea during an influenza pandemic. Now, does that mean wearing a mask solves all problems of transmission? Does that eliminate the transmission of the virus? No, nothing is all or nothing. But it seems to me that if you've got the flu and you're going out in public, or you got a bad cold, wearing a mask is a good thing to do. And during an influenza pandemic, if you're going to be around other people, particularly inside, yeah, I think wearing a mask is a good idea. Now, will it just mitigate transmission by 5%, 10%, 15%? Sure. And I noticed that we've got statistics out of Los Angeles saying that, out of Israel, vaccinated individuals had 27 times higher risk of symptomatic COVID infection compared to those with natural immunity from prior COVID disease. Wow, that sounds really bad for the vaccines, but there are no COVID deaths in either group. So I don't think this is particularly significant. So yeah, vaccinated people are getting COVID, but they are rarely dying. So they're about 1/25. All right, they're somewhere between 1% and 4% as likely to be hospitalized as people who are not vaccinated. So people who are getting hospitalized for COVID now, about 95 to 99% of them are unvaccinated. And also people who are vaccinated, much less likely to die, much less likely to get hospitalized. So yeah, it seems to me common sense that in an influenza situation or just common cold or common flu, you should wear a mask when you're around other people. So yeah, I would expect, I'm not an expert in this obviously, I would expect that face masks would reduce the spread of the virus, maybe only 10%. So Richard Spencer says, I hope Vance, Hillbilly Elegy, author, memoir of a family and a culture in crisis. So J.D. Vance. Richard says, I hope he loses. He's running for the U.S. Senate. He seems nice. At the end of the day, he's a smarmy faker. He's not comfortable in any skin, whether that be hillbilly or Yale law graduate. If the GOP is a Trumpian party, then they must re-nominate the real deal. Will Trump achieve anything? Of course not. But he's the only man willing and able to unleash the Freudian id of his base. So the Trumpism of Donald Trump features outrageous racist declarations that generate chaos but which contain little substance. So the smart Trumpism of J.D. Vance features lame tactical critiques which gently press racial hot buttons, performing in a hometown football t-shirt. Well, J.D. Vance does not want to admit tens of thousands of Afghan refugees. So to me, J.D. Vance would be great for the U.S. Senate. So I stand with J.D. Vance. So Jacob Rossi tweets, respect Joe Biden for showing real leadership amid the evacuation from Afghanistan. There have been 0 American casualties in the withdrawal until today. What does the slanted coverage of Joe Biden's withdrawal say about the news media? So, yeah. Yeah, Corn Pop was the first to underestimate Joe Biden's resolve. He wasn't the last. Everyone keeps underestimating Ice Cream Man, says Richard. And it'd be interesting, in California, Larry Elder seems to have like a 40% chance of becoming the next governor of California. So Larry Elder is a libertarian conservative radio talk show host. Dennis Prager got him a regular radio gig on KABC starting about 1991. And looks like there's about 40%, 50% chance that Gavin Newsom will be recalled. And if Gavin Newsom, current California governor, is recalled, then Larry Elder will likely take his place. So this is Richard Spencer tweeting, here's how I see the next few years. Gavin Newsom gets recalled, leading to a Republican interregnum. GOP takes back the House in a Tea Party wave. Trump launches presidential campaign. In 2024, Trump gets demolished and permanently ended by Joe Biden. America will have experienced a 10-year Trump era beginning in 2015 and ending in 2025. A decade for the right that will amount to little more than a stupid and futile gesture. Oh, I don't agree with that. Trump was able to significantly reduce immigration. He was able to significantly raise real wages for the least educated segment of the American population, and he got tougher with China. And Joe Biden, to his credit, is even tougher on China than Donald Trump was. So, interesting article in the Washington Post, long article. A science in the shadows, controls on gain of function experiments with supercharged pathogens have been undercut despite concern about lab leaks. So a decade ago, scientists funded by the National Institutes of Health used ferrets to engineer a highly lethal flu virus. The purpose of the research, known as gain of function, was to better understand how viruses evolve and help devise medicines to combat the potential disease threats. So there's a solid chance that this COVID pandemic originated in a lab leak in Wuhan. So this kind of research comes with a risk, a laboratory mishap that could unleash a devastating pandemic, very much like what we are experiencing. So this research in 2011 was conducted in the Netherlands and at the University of Wisconsin, sparked an international controversy that led to new safeguards for such experiments. But over the past 4 years, National Institutes of Health leaders and other US officials have weakened key aspects of those controls. So who did this? Who did the weakening? According to this long, in-depth Washington Post investigation, Anthony Fauci and NIH Director Francis Collins, they led the way to weaken these safeguards. So this high-risk gain-of-function research has achieved a great deal of discussion and notoriety because such experiments in Wuhan, China may well have accidentally triggered the coronavirus pandemic. So we've had numerous lab leak accidents around the world leading to release of pathogens and deaths. So we have a Stanford University microbiologist, David Roman, says the risks from this research are real. They're not intellectual constructs. They're not hypotheticals. Eventually, something that you make or information that you release will result in an accident of some kind. Yeah, playing with nature can bite back. So the US has supported these gain-of-function experiments And in the United States, National Institutes of Health Director Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci, Director of the agency's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, have led the federal funding, and they have led the way to weaken oversight and safeguards on gain-of-function research. So what is gain-of-function research? The term refers to techniques used to enhance aspects of a dangerous pathogen. It's usually done via a combination of gene editing and serial passage of the pathogen between animal hosts. Look, I think this is the bigger picture. We can no longer trust Science Incorporated, because Science Incorporated is overwhelmingly funded by entities with a very strong agenda. And so if you want to get funding for your scientific research, for any scientific research, you face huge incentives to deliver to your funders the results they want to see. And so in the process, this is a problem with any goal. Like, you have a goal, I have a goal. We're tempted to make ethical shortcuts in achieving our goals, and also goals narrow our perspective. So science is not generally funded open-ended. Science is overwhelmingly funded by people with a specific agenda, and if you want to get funding, you need to feed that agenda and tell the funders what they want to hear. So yeah, you can call this regulatory capture. But medicine, all right? We can't trust Medicine Incorporated in general, because Medicine Incorporated protects doctors who repeatedly engage in bad behavior, right? It's really hard to get rid of doctors, even if doctors who've been successfully sued, had 5 medical malpractice claims, successful claims lodged against them. Most of them face no discipline. So Medicine Incorporated does not discipline its doctors sufficiently, does not keep an eye on them. Doctors with huge, just glaring malfeasance and incompetence, killing people, right? They're still practicing frequently without any discipline. So we can't trust Science Incorporated, can't trust Medicine Incorporated. We can't trust the government. We can't trust what the IRS says. We can't trust declarations from the military. Can't trust the New York Times. You can't trust me, right? We can't automatically distrust these entities either, all right? Look, my perspective is that I'm stuck in the middle here with you. You can't automatically trust or distrust the CDC. You can't automatically trust or distrust the medical establishment. You can't automatically trust or distrust figures presented by any government agency or proclamations by the FBI or the US military or the CIA, right? We were told that the CIA had concluded that Russia massively interfered with our 2016 election. What did that mean? It meant that a few handpicked officials who were going to give the CIA leader what he wanted to hear, they came together and they created a consensus statement that Russia massively interfered with our 2016 election, which was not true. So when we're told the CIA says or the FBI says, or there's been a legal decision, like according to a legal decision, O.J. Simpson did not kill Nicole Brown and her boyfriend, right? We know that's bogus. So we can't automatically believe Science Incorporated, Medicine Incorporated, CDC Incorporated. I don't think we can automatically disagree and automatically distrust those sources either. We have to treat each source of information, look at what is the best of the available evidence. That there's no easy way out here, right? I'm not for automatically trusting or distrusting Anthony Fauci. I'm not for automatically trusting or distrusting the National Institutes of Health. I'm not for automatically trusting or distrusting what the American Psychiatric Association says. I think there are valid critiques of all our major institutions, and we should pay attention to the critiques, and we should also give the institutions a fair go. Michael Shermer never questions official government narratives. That's nonsense. I think Michael Shermer has a very impressive track record. So I'm not for automatically trusting Michael Shermer, but he has a pretty good track record. So why is gain of function research? Yes, this is Jerusalem in the poster. So why is gain of function research so controversial? Because these experiments increase the transmissibility or the virulence, make these certain strains of flu and coronaviruses more dangerous, more risky. So if such a pathogen infects a scientist or escapes from a lab, a pandemic like what we've experienced could very well result. So if gain-of-function research is so risky, why do it? Well, this research has a lot of uses. We can tweak mouse genes to limit fat deposits, to create mutations in pathogens, to estimate future threats. So it's not like gain-of-function research only has dangers and no upsides, right? There are upsides to a lot of risky research, and there are downsides to a lot of risky research. And I'm not sitting here proclaiming we must never do risky research, or we must always do risky research. If Science Incorporated says we need to do it, we must always do it, right? Science obviously can't govern itself. It has proved itself to be too irresponsible. Meaning Science Incorporated is just a small number of large funders dominate Science Incorporated, and they fund research that, generally speaking, tells them what they want to hear. So science has not shown that it's capable of governing itself. Any thoughts on Ron Jeremy being indicted for over 30 counts of sexual assault? The accusations of sexual assault against Ron Jeremy generally seem credible to me. So some of them may be not credible, but generally speaking, the rape accusations against Ron Jeremy seem credible. And Colin Liddell's throwing down an interesting link here on globalism and nationalism. The dissident right is not a serious intellectual movement. It's Colin Liddell, so I'll throw a link to that in the video description. So yeah, most of the serious accusations, like on their face, serious accusations in the Me Too movement, like you just hear the accusations, you see the person making them, you hear about whether or not the person reported these accusations at the time. I think it's fairly easy to get kind of a sense about the lethality of the Me Too accusations. So I'm just doing this show talking to my phone, so I can't bring on any guests. This is just an informal chat with my phone. Also, rape, like almost everything else, it is socially conditioned, right? So what Ron Jeremy did, much of what he did may be in certain circumstances and certain time periods not have been considered rape or would not have been prosecuted. But the Me Too movement has made us more sensitive to this problem of, rampant predatory male sexuality, overriding women's consent. So men tend to be incredibly insistent with regard to their sexual needs if they think they have any chance. So unless a woman puts a man in his place right away, men will just be incredibly insistent to get their sexual needs met. And a lot of women just kind of get beaten down. So strong women, they're clear. It's like, no way, Jose, this is not on. But women who don't have that strength and that wisdom, they often get worn down and bullied into doing all sorts of sexual things that they don't want to do. Like Philip Roth, right? You read that Blake Bailey biography of Philip Roth, and I would not want Philip Roth around a woman that I cared about. Like he had a coolly predatory sexual approach that fell, seems to me, way short of Me Too. So he was not going around raping people. He was never accused of rape. Yeah, men will frequently be incredibly insistent for sex, even if they think they don't have a chance. They just feel like, I've got to give it a go. Or what's the downside here? And so the downside for men insisting on, having sex with a woman is going to depend on the culture, right? We are much more sensitive to questions of sexual assault now than we were 8 years ago. And 8 years ago, we were more sensitive to questions of sexual assault than we were 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 50 years ago. So all sorts of behaviors which 20, 30, 40 years ago would not have been prosecuted as rape are now going to get prosecuted as rape. Because times change, circumstances change, culture changes, and certain behaviors which were just laughed at 20, 30, 40 years ago, now they get prosecuted. So, yeah, fascinating long essay here in the Washington Post. It's the most exhaustive research into gain-of-function studies and how leaders in the U.S. science community, such as Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci, have steadily reduced safeguards against gain-of-function research. So this is the most comprehensive, in-depth, reported essay on this topic that I have seen yet. Topics, as she says in the chat, Richard Spencer had a "we're going to ritually humiliate the moment" on his most recent appearance on the Kill Stream. Richard got agitated by several callers into the show accusing Richard of being a Fed. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think Richard's a Fed. Spencer said that weak immigration to the West will purge the weak whites. Said that mass immigration to the West will purge the weak whites. So Colin Liddell made this point that the alt-right, the dissident right, started out as a movement of words, of the written word, up until about 2014. So it attracted a much higher IQ element. And so Richard kind of rose to prominence when the alt-right was a higher IQ movement. Then, starting in 2014, 2015, it increasingly became a movement of the spoken word rather than the written word. And so the average IQ of the people who was into it steadily dropped. So most of the pushback, the abuse that Richard gets, I think, is just low IQ behavior. So 8 years ago, Francis Collins, Anthony Fauci put in place high-level reviews in response to concerns about gain-of-function research by the administration of President Barack Obama. So they were alarmed by what they saw as insufficient scrutiny of the research with ferrets. And so Collins and Fauci pledged to subject gain-of-function research to increased transparency and vetting. So they formed a review group of federal officials known informally as a Ferrets Committee to vet proposed gain-of-function projects for safety and worthiness. But eventually, over time, Collins and Fauci shaped policy changes that undercut the committee's authority. And so in 2017, they made a change to remove the committee's power to block their gain-of-function projects, recasting the panel as strictly an advisory body. And they gave themselves greater leeway to approve gain-of-function projects without referring them even to the review committee. So yeah, you can call Anthony Fauci Dr. Ferret. Because the people doing the research were complaining that having to submit their research to review would slow the whole bureaucratic process of approval and funding, and it would slow scientific progress. Guys, you're not against scientific progress, are you? You're not looking to slow scientific progress, are you? So these gain-of-function experiments have continued amid great secrecy, and the Health and Human Services group, which administers the review committee, has kept its work confidential. So no agendas, no meeting minutes, no records of these proceedings are made public. The names of federal officials assigned to serve on the committee are kept secret. So Anthony Fauci has been the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease since 1984. So he's a doctor, he's a scientist, and his institute funds gain-of-function research that increases the transmissibility and the virulence of pathogens. And many fear that this funded research inadvertently caused our COVID pandemic. Francis Collins, he's another physician. He's also a geneticist, along with Anthony Fauci. He claims that the benefits of gain-of-function research outweigh the risks because of its potential to help develop vaccines and therapeutics. Now, their major critic is Robert Kadlec. He's Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's a physician, former Air Force officer with decades of biodefense policy experience. He says that U.S. funded gain-of-function research has not been adequately vetted. So Michael Jones has accused Jared Taylor of subverting white nationalism for Jewish interests and says that Jared derailed David Duke's run for governor of Louisiana. And he complains that Jared Taylor has never invited Kevin McDonald to speak at American Renaissance conferences. And Michael Jones claims that Jared Taylor inspired Richard Spencer to march on Charlottesville and destroy the alt-right movement. Jared had given up on Richard Spencer after the Hellgate moment at the end of 2016. So I don't think it's fair to say that Jared inspired Richard to march on Charlottesville. So officials at the National Institutes of Health, they don't want to talk about how many gain-of-function projects they have funded since controversy over the ferrets peaked in 2012. They do admit they confirmed grants for 2 projects in 2018. So when asked to provide the number of projects that they funded, Collins and Fauci said, well, the answer would depend on how do you define gain of function? How is it defined in a particular given year? The Washington Post has identified 18 projects that won funding from 2012 to 2020 that include gain of function experiments. So funding from the NIH for these 18 projects totaled about $50 million, and the research unfolded at 13 institutions. 8 were approved after 2017 when the review committee's power was weakened. And yes, Anthony Fauci did encourage the development of COVID vaccines, so good on you. Good on you, Anthony. Good work. So from 2017 to 2020, no more than 3 or 4 gain-of-function projects were forwarded to the review committee. So essentially, they were grading their own homework. So what Fauci and Collins were doing with regard to gain-of-function research, they were essentially grading their own homework. So Dr. Kadlec says high-risk research was not adequately vetted. We didn't have the scientific oversight. The review committee's capabilities were not strong enough to make sure that bad things did not happen. So if you're going to ask society to take on higher than normal levels of risk, there should be more openness about this gain-of-function research. So the NIH under Fauci and Collins have significantly revised the definition of gain-of-function research. So that's why Fauci is always telling Rand Paul, oh no, we weren't funding gain-of-function research because they just changed the definition of gain-of-function. So federal policy governing gain-of-function research is opaque and probably needs strengthening. You think after the COVID pandemic where we've had deaths of between 4 and 15 million people that may well have started as a result of a lab leak. Bye-bye.